What's going on, guys? Welcome to Everything Always. My name's Michael Roman, aka All Fires. Now, 3 weeks ago at San Diego Comic-Con, when Marvel Studios showed exclusive footage to Guardians of the Galaxy, Secret Invasion, and then eventually Quantumania, there were a ton of descriptions. I even did a full breakdown of the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer. You can find them all over YouTube. But where I stopped short was the Quantumania footage. And not because I couldn't recount exactly what happened during the footage. I could. It's just that the dialogue from Kang himself was an impossible mess of contradictions, and so much so had me thinking on every aspect of what I thought I knew about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and time travel. And while I've got a follow-up video coming in the next couple of days that will expand on some of the ideas I present during this video, we have to talk about the one variable Marvel Studios has already shown us during the Infinity Saga that Kang would have had to solve for across the multiverse, proof he not only knew of but also killed many times Iron Man himself. And there is so much evidence for this already. We're going to break it down in its entirety and explain why one of the key adversaries in the Avengers would have ultimately been Tony Stark, and why Kang has already killed him so many times across the multiverse. But first, if you could grab the subscribe button. We do daily Marvel content at the channel. That's all we do. Everything from official Easter egg breakdowns, trailers, and reviews to the occasional industry insider report and everything in between. So if that sort of thing's for you, hit the sub button, leave a comment down below. That will automatically enter you to win our ongoing PS5 giveaway. If you want, stick around to the end of the video. We'll get into all the giveaway stuff again there. Okay, so first up, we need to differentiate between time travel and multiversal travel. The first of which is what we saw in Avengers Endgame. That's time travel along one multiversal timeline. And for the record, this is something that during Loki Season 1, the TVA said was supposed to happen, quote unquote. More on that in a second. The other is what we're introduced to as Nathaniel Richards, who Kang says sometime in the past in the 31st century, sometime in the past in the future. And that's just one example of the many contradictions I alluded to in the prologue to this video that are littered across Kang's dialogue. So when he said to Sylvie he may be lying during that rant at the end of Loki Season 1, he may have been. Remember, this is the guy who orchestrated the entire TVA and lied to all of them about how they ultimately serve the quote-unquote sacred timeline. So while we have to just either take what he said about multiversal travel at face value or reject it, what we do know is what we saw about time travel during the Infinity Saga. Now, Marvel Studios very early on in Phase 4 decided to show us that there are multiple variants of each character across the infinite multiverse, and as is the case in Loki Season 1 and even the most recent Multiverse of Madness, sometimes these variants look exactly like their counterpart. It's nice to imagine there's another RDJ Tony Stark out there. Regardless if it's his own doppelganger or a different version, there are multiple Tony Starks out there. And as we saw in our very own timeline, while he was reluctant to do it, Tony went ahead and discovered how to manipulate time travel along his own timeline. Now, in our timeline, he was an older, benevolent Tony Stark who had a purpose of saving the universe and a family to protect. But you have to imagine, across the timeline, like Superior Iron Man, there are many who would not stop, who would not choose to turn away from this. In fact, try to time travel at their own behest and for their own purposes. That's exactly what Kang does across the multiverse on his own timeline. And we've already seen evidence of this in the MCU with as many Kang Easter eggs as they've sowed already. Now, we know they're going to draw from the comics, and we also know that the upcoming Quantumania, which will be in the quantum realm, a realm outside of time, is set to be sort of like the HQ for Kang, outside of time, so he can come and go as he wants along points in the timeline. Eric Voss over at New Rockstars has theorized a couple of times in his videos that the time vortexes that were mentioned in Ant-Man 2 may be the waypoints that were existing from Kang that Tony hacked. Now, I'm not sure if there's evidence of that, or we're going to learn about how Kang goes about going up and down the timeline, at least in the 616 as we see it in Ant-Man Quantumania. We do know that Tony was able to do this with a GPS bracelet, and now we know that he would have been one of the only characters or only Avengers that would have stood in Kang's way, especially those versions across the multiverse that were also time traveling. That's why when Kang said during the Quantumania footage, "You're an Avenger, have I killed you yet?" he's well aware of the Avengers, and the only Avenger that would have been keeping up with him in the timeline, at least that we know of, would have been Tony Stark. Because remember this, even with the turn of phrase in the past, in the future, sometime long ago in the 31st century, Tony Stark in the Avengers, at least if he's our Tony Stark, wouldn't have existed at that point in the timeline. And while, yeah, maybe the Avengers goes on to exist for a couple hundred or 1,000 years, it's unlikely. Way more likely the case, he ran into Tony Stark time traveling, or at least his variants, and understood that he was one of the only Avengers that rivaled him on that level. And I think what we're going to learn, the big picture here, is that Tony Stark's death may be one of the variables that Kang had to fix for in every version across the multiverse so that he could ultimately keep control. A fixed moment, if you will, like from the lingo in the first What If season, that had to happen in order for him to maintain the sacred timeline. And if you take that context and then apply it to why the Avengers were allowed to time travel during the 616 timeline, is because Doctor Strange said it himself. That was the one way that they could defeat Thanos, but also the one way Kang could ultimately lead to Tony Stark's death. And you have to wonder, along the multiverse, how many times he let Tony Stark's own ambition be his downfall instead of having to combat him one-on-one, as was the case with 616. Him destroying Thanos meant his own demise. Kang didn't have to do anything to control his death in that timeline. Now, even bigger picture and final thought, knowing that Quantumania is featuring the quantum realm outside of time and that Tony Stark would have been such a threat across the multiverse with time travel, it sort of points to time travel as one of the ways to defeat Kang, or at least combat him across the multiverse. It means that Tony Stark is the first person to present that in the 616 and what seems like rather early in the development of the timeline, or at least early, late. The future is back in time. Yeah, welcome to time travel in the MCU. And on a quick side note, since we're talking about it, I think this is a good place to offer my opinion. I trust Marvel Studios. I trust Kevin Feige. I know they're going to put the best writers on this, and I'm super excited to see what Destin Daniel Cretton does with Kang Dynasty, but they are asking a lot of themselves to do a time travel story as it pertains to multiversal travel without enormous plot holes. Look, there's a reason Rick and Morty left time travel stuff on a box on a shelf, and when they finally did it during the Snake Jazz episode, they used the metaphor of a snake eating its own tail. You just always have the rules where going into the past affects the future, otherwise what's the purpose of time travel? And when you do that, then you end up just having more and more going back in time at earlier and earlier points, like all of the snakes falling out of the portals in the sky. Again, the metaphor, it's just a huge plot hole, a huge snake eating its own tail when you start to do this. So it is going to be a huge trick, is what I'm saying, to the writers in that room, to the director Destin Daniel Cretton, to the Marvel Studios team, for them to combat time travel, multiversal travel at the same time, make it meaningful, but also not leave a major plot hole. Well, they've got 3 years to get it done, and we all can't wait to see. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you agree with this theory or not, you got to agree, no matter what, not every Tony Stark variant would have ignored time travel. He would have been in there at any given chance. Look, he did it in our own universe to save the universe, but in others, it might have been to save whatever he wanted, something along the lines of Doctor Strange from What If Season 2. But even if you don't agree with that, I am all ears in the comments. Quickly, let's jump into the giveaway stuff before I let you go. We're still giving away PlayStation 5s every 20,000 subscribers, all the way up to 1 million. If you want to be entered to win, all you have to do, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. That will automatically enter you to win our ongoing PS5 giveaway. If you want, the best way to keep up with the content has always been to hit the notification bell with all notifications turned on. And as always, if you liked today's video, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. My name's Michael Roman. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at IamFires. You can also find me on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, iTunes under the name Allfires. And while I sincerely appreciate you checking my music out, thanks for checking this channel out. Stick around. We'll be posting again real soon.